Neighboring. So when you think neighboring, maybe you think of one of my personal heroes, Fred Rogers, right? Who coined the phrase that we love, "Won't you be my neighbor?" Who actually was, if you know behind that, by the way, the documentary they made last year is one of the more powerful stories unfolding about his life. It was amazing. That man truly understood what it meant to be a gospel neighbor and what it meant for the gospel to show hospitality, which is love of strangers. And so when I see our thing and I think neighboring, I can't help but want to I wish I had a sweater up here that I could get into, and I'd take off my shoes, sit in the front row, and put on some slip-on shoes. Although slip-on shoes is almost all I wear. So I already feel like I'm the chill half of Mr. Rogers. And maybe I need to step up my game and get into a suit coat or something. But anyway, I just love that guy. But that's a good start. But please understand that there's so much to what it means to be a neighbor. And what Melissa even hinted at, you find out when you're in need how quickly and valuable it is to have people around you on your right and left, to be a neighbor and to have neighbors. So we're not just talking about who's across the fence. We're talking about who's right in front of us. As we learned from last week, the Great Samaritan showed us who our neighbor is, and more importantly, who we are a neighbor to. Because God's desire is not so much that we pick and choose and decide who we'll love and who we won't love. That's not for us to decide. But more importantly is, who will we be a neighbor to? Will we be neighborly? Will we love and serve others? And we're in week 2 of this neighboring series. And last week was a big deal. We got to see, who Jesus said a neighbor was. Today is about hospitality. It's about gospel hospitality. And when you hear the word hospitality, again, it's one of those words that maybe we misunderstand a little bit, because hospitality sounds like we're having a Christian luncheon or something where everything is well decorated, and my version of decorating would be the paper plates have flowers on them that I bought. I didn't just get the white ones that are 500 and they're this, thick. I spent time and got a better paper plate. But hospitality is so much more than having a luncheon, although it could include lunch. And if you know me well, it's going to include lunch and dinner and breakfast and second breakfast and all those things that keep us hobbits going. But what hospitality really is, it's making strangers friends and friends family. Hospitality, and in fact, the word, we're going to get into the word itself, but that was the way of Jesus. The way of Jesus was making strangers friends and friends family. And it's what he did constantly through his whole life. Hospitality is actually a really deep thing. And it comes from this word, philoxenia, okay? And the two words in that Greek word are the word love, a brotherly love, philo, and then the second part, which is strangers. So you've heard of a xenophobe, right? Somebody who has a fear of strangers. Xenia is a stranger. And so this word hospitality actually means to cultivate or to have a love for strangers. Really what it means is that we see people who we don't know and we say they could become friends and friends can become family because I follow the way of Christ. And so this was Jesus everywhere he went. Think about the people he ate with and taught and loved and healed. And if he was not already eating with others, he was being invited to eat with others. He spent time with people. And when he saw strangers, he didn't see them as somebody to avoid, but as somebody that might be an opportunity to know and to have the stranger become a friend. And then we know he brought them into the family of God. And so it doesn't end with Jesus. Actually, the early church was marked completely with philoxenia. I mean, it was just this love of people and this willingness to reach out and this willingness to make sure that nobody inside the church had need because they cared for each other, and then they served their community and loved strangers well and turned strangers into friends who became family. So they daily met in the temple courts and they met in each other's homes. It says that they broke bread, which meant they ate with each other and they shared their faith with each other. They welcomed people in. And it says their church grew daily, that the church grew daily as they loved strangers into family. I love that. And a message like today, it might free you up or it might challenge you. Here's what I mean by that. It might free you up because some of you overcomplicate your faith, not realizing that heart that God already gave you to care for others, to eat a meal with others, and to hang out with people is a huge part of the kingdom of God. So today might free you up simply because you think, well, I've got to do if I'm going to follow Jesus, I have to do more churchy stuff. You know what I mean? And not realizing that maybe that heart that God already gave you to eat with people, to serve them, to create meals for them, to bless your neighbors, to serve people, to go mow your neighbor's lawn, that all these moments could be that you just need freed up to realize that's how God made you, and that's a huge part of his kingdom, okay? Here's the second thing. A message like today might challenge you because you like a solitary life, and you like everything ordered just so. And you're going to be challenged today to see that your faith and the kingdom of God, everything, the way God designed his kingdom to run is life on life, and that we can't live a solitary life. So today might free you up to say, cool, I love to do that, and that's part of God's natural, way he does things in his kingdom. Or today might challenge you to say, man, I realize I like a solitary life ordered just so, and God might want me to develop a love for strangers so that they can become friends, so that friends can become family. No matter who you are, and maybe you're a bit of both, but here we go with this first part, and it's God's intention. Okay, God's intention was that we would be a people of hospitality. And this goes all the way back. In fact, the verse we're reading is from Leviticus 19, 33 through 34. It says, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. This is going all the way back. This is Old Testament law. This is God telling his new nation, this is how you live. You don't live like the nations around you. You live different, and my standard is this. And so when we read these things, these are the laws given to this new developing nation named Israel. And so to give you some history before that, there was a man named Abraham, and God met with him and basically said, you're going to have descendants as numerous as the stars. All nations will be blessed through you, because we know that Abraham was the family that the Jews came from, and eventually that Jesus came from. So when God met him, he was telling him, not only are you going to have a family, but you're going to bless the world with a nation, and then all nations will be blessed through you, because Jesus will come through your seed. So Abraham, we know he has Isaac, who has Jacob, who has 12 sons. So in other words, Jacob was dysfunctional, but because who has 12 sons and lives through that well, right? But anyway, he did, and he becomes Israel. And the sons represent these tribes that all become this new nation. And we know that nation turns from God, is taken over by nations. We know that they become slaves. They go back and forth by being constantly barraged and attacked by nations. And whenever they trust in God and turn to God and do things God's way, they're delivered and they find hope again. Whenever they don't, it seems that they go in these patterns, and now we forget the Lord, and then they end up in the muck, and they end up in slavery again, and why are we here? Yeah, we forgot the Lord. And they turn back to him, and whenever they turn back, he's faithful to deliver them. But what we see in Leviticus is, as they formed and became a new nation, there was new standards. There was holiness. There was a people that honor God. And then finally the promised land. And as they become this nation, God's heart was, now that you're a new people and a people who represent me, how then should you live? Which of course it's for any of us as we follow Christ. The question we must always battle with is, how then do we live? How do we behave? How do we treat our fellow man? How do we honor God with our lives? How do we honor our family or our spouse or our coworkers? How do we live the way of Jesus in our culture right now? And so he gives them this word to Abraham, that when a foreigner resides among you in your land, you can see that from the very beginning, to be a people of hospitality. Do not mistreat them. And isn't that great? He was saying, don't you remember how it was for you when you were the foreigner, when you were the one in exile, when you were in slavery, how you were mistreated? And now that we're a nation, now that you're a nation that reflects me, you won't live that way. You won't live that way. Us as a new nation, because we're a nation, but really we're a new people through Jesus as followers of him. That nation must also live like the king. Any nation honors its king, and how we honor the king is we live out his words. And King Jesus, we know he welcomed all. He welcomed the rich and the poor, the unlovely and the powerful. Loved them all. And God's heart, again, the question for us is, who will you be? Who will you be? This is the heart of the kingdom of God, that we are free indeed. and that freely we can love others. So we live in this new way of righteousness unto Jesus, which motivates how we live and also motivates how we love. So if you think of it this way, my integrity, my holiness, my righteousness, my humility, my love for others, my passion for justice, my desire for protecting those who can't protect themselves, and my hospitality, they all stem from the Spirit of God that works in me. And the same with you. So you can look at each of those things as something that the gospel wants to bear down on and transform in you. And that's the good news, is that through Jesus, those things can be changed. And so we are a people of hospitality. This next part, number 2, is actually, the title is Dinner with Angels. Dinner with Angels. Hebrews 13, 1 through 2 says, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without even knowing it. Okay, time out. Because I think sometimes we read the Bible as if it's totally normal and then just keep talking. Like, think if I told you this, like we weren't reading in a Bible, but I said, hey, like the other day I had dinner with this stranger and it turned out he was an angel. You'd be like, oh, we need to help Sean. Like, serious, like why? How can we just read something like that and not address it? We read it like, yeah, God's amazing. But if I told you at dinner with an angel the other day, you'd be like, you need like help. You know, like I'm going to connect you with my counselor today. It just sounds so different. And I actually have to tell you my story. I don't know if he's an angel to this day, but so tomorrow is Christy Meyer 24th anniversary is tomorrow. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. So, well, thanks. It's easy. Yeah. But anyway, when we were first on our first little date, we were downtown Olympia, and we went to the gazebo and we hung out and sat back to back and talked. And then we walked down to to Bayview Market. And Bayview on the side of the water used to have like these little springy toys that you could sit on. So we were sitting on those. And you know those springy ones you can really rock on when you're little? You can still do that when you're, gosh, we were like 18 and 20. Okay, so we were young. And we were sitting on those and rocking. And this guy talks to us. And he was this homeless man who just came up and he said, what are you guys doing? So we talk and we're having fun getting to know this guy. And he says, so what are you, like, together? And we kind of looked at each other, kind of with that shy, like it's new, we're just hanging out, but like, well, I don't know. And he goes, you don't know? How do you not know? And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's like, and he goes, do you want to be with her? And I'm like, yes. Like, that's like easy question, you know. And then he says, do you want to be with him? And she says, yes. Right on. He goes, all right, get over here. And the guy, I don't know if you remember the show Taxi, but he used to imitate, this guy through the whole thing was talking like Jim from Taxi. Christopher Elliott's, his character, Jim. So he's being Jim, and he goes, get over here. I'm going to do a ceremony. And he did. He says, do you like him? Yes. Do you like her? Yes. Okay, I now pronounce you officially together. It's done. And then he goes, have a nice forever. And he just walks off. And I was like, that was like a homeless angel. Like, I think it, and I'm not sure, and you might never come back because you're like, the theology of this church is way wrong. I just think maybe he was an angel. I'm not sure. The guy did a great Jim from Taxi impression, though. Here's why I say this. Sometimes we encounter a stranger and we're not... I think why this matters, and in fact, here's why it matters, because Jesus told a story. He told a parable where he said at the end of the days, God starts separating the goats from the sheep, those who he knows are his, those who think they're his, but really they're joking, they're kidding themselves and trying to kid him. And he starts separating them, and he says to them, like, I was hungry and you did not feed me. I was thirsty. You did not give me something to drink. I was in jail. You didn't visit me. I was a stranger. You didn't welcome me in. I was naked. You didn't clothe me. And they're like, Lord, when were you any of those things? We would have done it, surely we would have seen you. And also he says to the sheep, blessed are you and come into my kingdom, because I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison. You visited me. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And they said, we don't remember doing this. So one crew is saying, we surely would have done it if it was you. And the other crew is saying, we don't remember doing that to you. And what he says in that parable is, what you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. Do you see why the stranger matters so much? The stranger is the face of Jesus looking to see who will be. And that's why hospitality is so powerful. It's not just, can I make a beautiful meal? It's, can I have a love for strangers that sees the face of Christ in somebody and in need? You know, we actually, if you think about it right now, especially in our city, we're dealing with homelessness in a way that's really hard, right? And it's doubly hard because we have multiple opinions on how to solve it, and we have social media, and that combination is terrible. It means that we yell at each other and say things we would never say based on our solution. I will say one thing, regardless of how we solve it, it's not a housing problem, it's a home problem, because those people need homes. In other words, they need love. And so in the same way, when Jesus says, I was a stranger and you invited me in, what he's saying is that person needs more than just something given or just some, in other words, they have something in their heart that needs to be fulfilled. And you saw that. And so when we talk about dinner with angels, and you talk about extending love to strangers, we're not just saying, yeah, like maybe this one's an angel. Like that would be weird theology, trying to have dinner with everybody hoping it was an angel. But what it's saying is that when we treat people with the love of Christ and hospitality, a love of strangers, we're seeing the face of Jesus in somebody who needs more than a house, they need a home. They need more than a meal, they need a friend at the table. And so that is the core of gospel hospitality. It's dinner with angels. So it could be somebody who just needs God's love shown to them. Could be someone that God sent to help you grow, which leads to this third part, which is you need practice. Part 3 is you need practice. Romans 12:13 says, share with the Lord's people who are in need and practice hospitality. Practice your faith. We'd all agree with that, right? That the concept of practicing your faith. And we know that from the book of James in the New Testament. James was the brother of Jesus and also a follower of Jesus, and he told us that faith without works is dead. It doesn't work. Or as the song by Rich Mullins that says, faith without works is like a song that you can't sing. It's about as useless as a screen door on a submarine. Great lyric if you think about it. But that's what faith without works is dead. It doesn't have a vehicle in which to express itself in truth. But how about if I told you that see, it's more than just belief, but I even think that actions and practice is the best way to a belief. In other words, we always want to start with, what do I believe? What are my beliefs? And those are great. But I think sometimes we act ourselves into ways of believing. So in other words, here's what I mean by that. If you say, I think hospitality is important, great. It's like you checked a box and agreed with Jesus. Now you're done. What if you said, I'm going to do this simply because I know it's important until I truly believe? And see, that is kind of the curse of churchianity, is we often leave our belief up here. Like, I believe these things. Okay, I agree with Jesus and all these things. I've checked all my boxes. However, belief becomes real and tangible when you see it in the hands and the feet and the heart, when the life and the actions are transformed by that belief. And so athletes actually, any of you know what muscle memory is? Okay, athletes know about this. If you're an athlete, you're like, your ears just perked up. Oh, muscle memory. That's that thing that coach always says I don't have because I don't practice. Let me tell you about my basketball shot before, when I was young. So I found out that I could run fast. I could jump really high. In fact, white men can jump because I was just devoted to jumping as high as I could until I could slam dunk a ball. And I could do it at like 18 years old. I can't now. Now I look like the ball. But I used to be able to slam dunk the ball, okay? So there was a moment in time when white men could jump. But here's the problem is my muscle memory, like if you said, what's your shot like? Well, throw the ball as hard as I could up there. And I was always rebounding my own rebounds because I'd have to, because I couldn't shoot. So it was like, I just got to get to if I can get there before anyone else, I can save my spazzy shot by a simple, by just getting there. Well, as I got older, I realized I can't really play with a lot of my friends because they all know how to shoot. But my muscle memory was this. I had to unlearn and relearn. And I had a friend one day, he was a really nice guy. He's those guys who can make three-pointers all day while they're having a conversation with you. His name was Gerald. He was annoying. But anyway, he was also awesome. And he said to me one day, he said, Sean, and he was always really cool about things. He was trying to say, you stink. But he was like, Sean, Like, maybe you should, like, have you ever seen some form? It's like he's trying to find a roundabout way to say, like, you don't know how to shoot. And anyway, I said, I never really learned. I mean, we'd play in PE, but he said, all right, get over here. And he showed me how to have it roll off my hand, how to snap my wrist, how to line up my body. Showed me a few things, and suddenly I was making shots. But I kept, whenever I was in a game, wanting to go back to that other thing. In moments of the stress of the game, I want to just throw the ball at the thing. And I had to relearn, and my muscle memory had a difference. So the difference was becoming mentored and encouraged, and then unlearning and learning again what I should be doing. My favorite chapter in the whole Bible, as far as a whole chapter, I don't have like one of those one verses. Like, some people have like, this is my life verse. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. I just don't have one. But I do have a chapter that I think is my favorite, and it's Romans 12. That thing is jam-packed with so much like the transformation of the gospel in our lives. And anyway, it's this powerful chapter that starts with telling us not to conform to how the world does things, but to be transformed by renewing our minds. In other words, we have to unlearn what we did know, and then we have to learn again what we should know. And along with that has to become practice. See, my life before Jesus was about me. I was the center of the universe, so my muscle memory was about do what makes me happy. Don't worry about if it hurts others. And just live for yourself. In other words, you're the sun. The planets rotate around you, Sean. My life used to be, and I had to unlearn being the center. I had to renew my mind, and what made all the difference was action. I had to act on my faith. If you wait until you feel like it, you won't get far. If you wait until if you always say, well, I have to feel it, I have to feel God, I have to feel like wanting to do these things, I have to feel hospitality, guess what? You just won't get far. You have to practice. You can act on those things, and eventually feelings do follow. So start with hospitality. Practice it. You get some muscle memory in being hospitable to others, being loving to others, showing love to strangers, and it grows and develops. But don't be ashamed that you're not perfect at it. Because honestly, you're going from a world that's centered around you to a world that centers around Christ as a new follower of Jesus, okay? I know there's people that are so good at this. In fact, when I talk about people who are hospitable, somebody probably comes to your mind right now, right? There's probably a friend you have or somebody who maybe was a mentor or a leader that you know, or it could be a family member, and you just think, man, they are good at it. I wish I was like them. I wish it came naturally to me. Don't worry about it. Just work on your own muscle memory. Work on your own response to seeing Jesus in the face of others. Just practice. Don't focus on what you aren't yet, which leads to the fourth thing, and that's work through your weakness. Work through your weakness. 1 Peter 4:8-9 says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. The visual on that's great, isn't it? Welcome to my home. Can't believe they're here, I mean, that just sounds funny, like offer hospitality without grumbling. It's saying show love to one another and serve one another without it being an issue. Gospel hospitality can be welcoming somebody to your home. It can be a home-cooked meal. It can be coffee or breakfast before work. It can be connecting in lots of different ways. But here's the thing. It is for all of us. Do you ever think, somebody that's ultra outgoing will do that, or the pastor will do that, or a leader or somebody else will be hospitable, and I can kind of just cheer them on as they be hospitable people. I don't know if you've ever heard the parable. This is a great parable about everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. Does anybody know this story? It's a great story. It says everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody were members of a group. There was an important job to do, and everybody was asked to do it. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody would have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody would do it, but nobody realized that anybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. It's a lot clearer now, isn't it? But serious, I think the first temptation of the enemy that holds us back from living a life of gospel hospitality that loves strangers into friends and friends into family is this temptation of, I'll let somebody else do that. I'll let somebody else do that. Somebody more spiritual. But you're a man or woman of God, and you're called to set aside weakness. We're called, in fact, to rejoice in our weakness because God's going to make it a strength. It says in our weakness, he's strong. So when we have a weakness and we say, well, whenever I'm hospitable, I complain, then we can just look at what Scripture says and say, oh, it doesn't look like I have room to do that. However, I don't have room to not be hospitable either. And so I need Jesus to show strength in my weakness. So when you find a weakness, friends, that's not when Jesus is done with you. That's when Jesus is about to show up in your life. In fact, that's why this is a great room. It's a room of sinners. It's a room of sinful people who have failed. And when you say, God, here's my weakness, he says, cool. Not that it's there, but that it's a place I can show great strength in you. Where, in fact, Peter, one of his followers, used to be named Simon, which Simon can be a name that can refer to weakness or lack. The word Peter comes from the word Petra, which is where we get rock. And he's saying, this is how you used to be known. Now you'll be known as a rock. And Peter was like this dude who, trust me, when he was the guy who was always talking big and not following through, making rash decisions, saying he was going to be the man that showed everybody up and following Jesus, and then was one of the people who deserted him first and denied even knowing him. But Jesus said, yeah, you know what? In your weakness, I'm going to show that you are a rock because you're standing in me. And in our weakness, Christ can show his strength. It ended up that this temptation of let someone else do that, the answer, of course, isn't to back out and say, well, I won't do it. Or the answer, of course, is also not to grumble about it. The good news is if it's hard for you to have a love for strangers, if it's hard for you to serve, to love those around you, the good news is that Jesus already knows that. He just doesn't care. I mean that tongue in cheek, but it's true. He knows that about you. It's just that he trusts his ways more than yours. Okay? He just doesn't care. You know what I mean, right? And so offer hospitality without grumbling. Pray that God changes your heart, but don't wait for your heart to be changed. Just start acting. And from here's this fifth and final part, is get a bigger cup. Get a bigger cup. Luke 6:38 says, give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For the measure you use, it will be measured to you. This principle is not a way for preachers to make sure you give more money to the church or to somebody on TV, although it has been used this way. And I always think it's interesting because if somebody on TV says, well, our ministry is going to fail, but if you give me money, you'll get 10 times back. I'm like, why doesn't that guy just give the money he needs divided by 10? Like, it's obvious. If the guy just needs this money and he's telling you, if you give to me, you'll get 10 times back, the dude should just give 1/10 of what he needs and it's all going to come right back to him, right? Okay, so we know that that's not the goal. The goal, and this is where, of course, we can take Jesus' good words and make them not good things by making them about us. Oh, if I give, I'll get a bunch back. However, the principle of what we receive based on our freedom to give is still true. It's just not the point. In other words, we don't do it to give, but wow, the principle is true. When we are hospitable, when we are free with our giving, when we're free with our loving, we find how it returns to us bigger. In other words, Jesus is saying, how you do this matters. And the freedom by which you trust me with what you have and how you love is how you find it returned to your own life. He's saying there's a freedom and a return to your life when you're generous. This applies to giving. This applies to serving. This applies to hospitality. Don't miss this. It's with the measure you use. How many of you have ever been stingy people before? I know I have. I've been stingy with my time, stingy with my money, stingy with, sharing what I have or the time I have or the effort I have with others. It's like you want a little Dixie cup of service. Like, God, here's my Dixie cup. Or even worse, like those little mouthwash cups, right, that are at the dentist in the bathroom. You're like, well, this is how I measure what I'm going to do. No more. Or you're like, well, this is a new year, new me, which is what everybody says in January, right? So new year, new me, I'm trading up to the Dixie cup. Because it's like 4 ounces, not 1.5. You're like, it's like double. Or then some of you are like, well, no, you know what? I'm going for the 16-ounce tumbler. I'm getting bigger, whatever. Just know that as your measure grows, you see God's work growing in your life as well. It's such a freeing thing. And here's why. It says that a good measure, given it will be given to you, a good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Jesus is saying if your measure of hospitality is Dixie cup size, Don't be surprised when your life feels kind of Dixie cup big. And it's why people like Mother Teresa can have nothing yet have everything. Because what that woman did was say, I don't live a Dixie cup life. I don't have much, but all that I have, I put it in like a barrel. And every time I pour it out, God pours back in. And he keeps doing that, so I just keep pouring it out. I mean, we applaud her as we should. A great servant of God and a great heart for people. But why we applaud her is simply she believed what God said about the measure you use to bless others. We see it in action. We say, that's amazing. But then sometimes I go back to my little Dixie cup life. This is how much I'll give others this week. My challenge to you is to reflect a bigger cup. Get a bigger cup. And it could be that you have enough faith for your cup to be like this big, or like a tumbler, or like a 7-Eleven Slurpee cup, or whatever it is. Some of you are in that 5-gallon bucket stage. What I'm saying is open your life up to be a generous, hospitable follower of Christ that sees people and sees the face of Jesus in strangers and loves them into friends who become family. As we close, just some thoughts to think about. Who are you today in your actions? Not just in your head belief, not in what you've checked off and agreed with Jesus about, but in what you've done. The next one is, who do you want to become? So who are you today in your actions, and who do you want to become? And then an important one here, what next step of hospitality do you need to take? Is it inviting somebody over, or lunch on break, or coffee or a meal, or lending a neighbor a hand? I believe that, and this is true, when something's on your radar, you notice it. And here's how I know this. If you've ever bought a new car, or a new to you car, it could be an old car, but let's say, for instance, I had an Eagle Summit, which looks like a van and a wagon had a baby, and the baby was ugly. It was actually a pretty cool car. It ran forever, got 40 miles a gallon. It was awesome. But, and that thing could haul everything. But anyway, once we got that car, I noticed them on the road. I never noticed them before. Does this resonate with you? Like something's new in your life and then you see it everywhere? Will you pray and look for an opportunity this week? Don't let the week go by without saying, okay, God, it's time for real hospitality in my life, to see the face of Christ in a stranger and to love strangers into friends who become family. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to look. And when you say, I'm going to do an act of hospitality this week for the sake of the gospel, you'll see it. You'll see the opportunity. It'll be right in front of you because you're thinking about it and you're looking for it.